I want to point out how important it is to be doing coronary artery calcium scans serially. The general attitude of the healthcare system towards coronary artery calcium scans is that they're still largely a one and done test, but seeing progression of scores is a very important predictor regarding heart disease. These days, I think that red meat is probably at the top of that list.
Welcome back to the channel, carnivores. It's me, Bella the Steak and Butter Gal, and in today's video, I bring you some information about what to focus on with blood work on the carnivore diet. I actually let Dr. Ovadia read and analyze, critique my own lab work as a 5-year carnivore, as well as my coaches. Raymond is a 6-year carnivore, Emily is a 3-year carnivore. Dr. Ovadia is one of the leading carnivore doctors. He will be visiting the Steak and Butter Gang alongside Dr. Anthony Chafee, Dr. Tony Hampton, Dr. Sean O'Mara, Rebecca Heichman, and Sean White, the intentional carnivore, to answer personal questions from all of the challengers who sign up for my upcoming challenge. If you're looking for help, coaching, guidance from these carnivore doctors, experts, and specialists that I just showed on the screen, check out my next 30-day challenge within the Steak and Butter Gang. For more details and to directly sign up, you can go to the URL shown on the screen right here or click the links down below in the description box. Hi, Dr. Ovadia. Welcome. How are you doing?
I am doing great. It's great to be here with you again, Bella, and good to see everyone in your community again, Emily and Ray.
We each have prepared some blood work, and Raymond has actually prepared his CAC for you to provide your opinion and your thoughts on.
Perfect. Yeah. And, I'll start this off by saying, hopefully by kind of seeing how I go through this exercise and how I work with my patients on these issues, it can kind of guide you as to the questions you should be asking of your practitioners, helping you to understand the context around your situation.
I put my numbers, and this is vegan from 2017. 2017, I was vegan for 6 years by then, and I am now 5 years carnivore.
Yeah, excellent to see this comparison. So again, we see, a total cholesterol level that went from 173 to 365. And of course, that would be concerning to most doctors. With that, your LDL cholesterol went from 81 to 264. And, this is something to point out, that one of the main health metrics that's used to promote and push vegan diets is LDL cholesterol. But as I said earlier, LDL cholesterol is a very lousy predictor of heart disease risk. Many people will have heard me and others talk about, the studies that have been done looking at patients coming into the hospital with a heart attack, and that their LDL cholesterols are basically not predictive. The first data that we had around LDL cholesterol really showed that it was only meaningful if it was exceptionally high. And that really gets into probably genetic issues around familial hypercholesterolemia, which brings in non-cholesterol issues that those people are prone to. So it really is not the amount of your cholesterol that we should be looking at. It's the quality of your cholesterol that we should be looking at. Your LDL goes up. Your HDL also goes up significantly from 73 to 98. And your triglycerides, I think I've told you this before, you have the lowest triglyceride level, I believe, I've seen at 15. Certainly, probably some genetics and everything else going on there. Your hemoglobin A1C goes from 5.5 down to 4.7. Which again is an excellent improvement. We see that your ratio between your triglycerides and your HDL went from about 1.3, 1.4 to 0.15, essentially 0.17 or so. So excellent improvement there. It's really not about the amount of your cholesterol. It's about the quality of your cholesterol. And so triglyceride to HDL ratio is one of those indicators of the quality of our cholesterol. A couple of other markers, that I'll look at to help us figure out quality of cholesterol is the V-LDL measurement. If you have a lab that doesn't report V-LDL, There are two ways you can estimate it off of a basic cholesterol panel. Divide your triglycerides by 5 is going to be an estimate of your VLDL. And you can also calculate what's called remnant cholesterol, which is mostly VLDL. There's a little bit of other stuff in there, but it's a kind of good enough estimate for most purposes. And to calculate remnant cholesterol, you take your total cholesterol and then you subtract your HDL cholesterol and then you subtract your LDL cholesterol. And what's left over is what's considered your remnant cholesterol. If we do your remnant calculation, we go from 19, when you were vegan, which, like I said, right on the border of what I consider to be ideal. And now your remnant cholesterol would be 3.
Wow.
Again, one of the lowest I've seen. And so I would tell you that that's an excellent improvement. And yes, I would want to see your insulin level and I would want to see all that, but very likely that those things are all going to look good for someone like yourself. Now, your vitamin D level as a vegan was exceptionally low at 12.1. It's gotten better, 23.5, but again, I would tell you that you probably still want that to be higher. Right now, where you live, even when the sun's out for much of the year, it's going to be at too low of an angle to really be effective for vitamin D synthesis. So you're someone else that may need to supplement vitamin D. Your vitamin B12 level as a vegan, again, was very, very low. Again, common for vegans to be vitamin B12 deficient because vitamin B12 is not present in plant products. That's a concern as well. For vitamin B12, probably anything over about 750, 800 is adequate. 1,500 is certainly an excellent level. Vitamin B12 is present in plentiful amounts in animal products. So it's rare that I see a carnivore that's vitamin B12 deficient. For Raymond, we have a coronary artery calcium scan from 2018. And then we have another coronary artery calcium scan from 2023. So we have about a 5-year difference between them. Before we get into the specific numbers, I want to point out how important it is to be doing coronary artery calcium scans serially, to be following them over time. Because one scan certainly gives us an idea about where you stand on the heart disease front, how significant or hopefully insignificant, heart disease may be in your context. Progression over time is another very important factor when it comes to coronary artery calcium scanning. I think we should be more aggressive with coronary artery calcium scans than most practitioners are. And I have many patients that I work with now that, we have them kind of getting scanned annually or every other year. The good thing about the coronary artery calcium scan is that the amount of radiation is much lower than it used to be with these scans. You literally just lay on the table for a couple of minutes and the scan is done. Most places you can get it done for, $100, $150. Many people in your community know that it's hard to get your doctor to order one of these scans, and then they may not see the utility in getting it on a repeated basis. The general attitude of the healthcare system towards coronary artery calcium scans is that they're still largely a one and done test, and you just kind of get an assessment about your heart disease risk, and they don't recognize the utility in doing it over time. But seeing progression of scores or lack of progression of scores is a very important predictor regarding heart disease risk as well. With that in mind, we'll talk about Raymond's results. And we'll go back to his original scan in 2018. Raymond was 46. He had what would be considered a high score for a 46-year-old. So his total score was 731. And that put him in the 99th percentile for his age, or 98th percentile, they said, for his age group. Meaning that he has more coronary calcium than 98% of the men that were between 45 and 49 at that time. one of the things that I like to talk to people about around the coronary artery calcium scan is, the number. You'll get an overall number, and that's a summary. Within that number, there's a lot of things to be paying attention to. Ideally, your physician should be looking at the distribution between the blood vessels, even within each blood vessel. I like to look at these pictures and see, you can have a lot of calcium in one spot, or you can have calcium that's kind of spread out throughout the blood vessel. 2018, Raymond got this high score. Obviously, a large portion of that time since then, he's been doing carnivore diet. I forget exactly when you started on that pathway, Raymond.
A year before, 2017.
Yeah. Oh, and this brings up another important point for someone who maybe has been on low carb carnivore diets for, maybe a year, maybe 2 years, maybe even longer. And they get their first coronary artery calcium scan. And if it's elevated, we don't exactly know what that might mean. Was the damage done prior to them starting, the dietary changes? Was it done, from carnivore low carb, which is always a concern, especially amongst uninformed practitioners? This is, again, where the repeat scan becomes so important. Now, assuming someone sticks to carnivore, low carb, whatever it is, if they're consistent in their habits, and then we get a repeat scan a year, 2 years, 3 years later, we now can truly see, okay, are things continuing to progress or not? Certainly someone like Ray, who's, on the young side and comes to me with a high coronary artery calcium scan, I would say, okay, we know that your body has the capacity, is prone towards forming coronary plaques, and we need to do something to slow that down. And again, addressing the root cause, addressing metabolic health, all of those things are typically going to be what I recommend. So, now we fast forward to 2023, and Raymond's repeat scan shows that his score has gone up some, 854. But now he's in the 90th percentile as opposed to the 98th percentile previously, which means, compared to sort of his comparison group, he's actually had some improvement. And this reflects the fact that we know that on average, coronary artery calcium scores are going to increase somewhere between 10 and 25% per year. To go from 731 to 854 over 5 years, I think that comes out to like less than 5% progression per year. That's good. That would indicate that we've at least slowed the progression. And again, we have data when we look at coronary artery calcium scans that if you're able to slow that progression, that's actually, lowering your risk of having a heart attack, of having a clinical event. For now, I would tell someone like Raymond that we've slowed the progression of their disease. We can be somewhat confident that most of this damage that we're seeing on the coronary artery calcium scan was done prior to Raymond adopting these dietary changes. I would probably scan again in a year or two. A lot of this is going to have to do with how Raymond's feeling, if Raymond's having any symptoms of heart disease, anything like that, that might prompt us to even look further. Because the other thing that I oftentimes point out to people is the coronary artery calcium scan is a great screening test, but it's not the end all and be all. And in some situations, especially if people are having symptoms or scores are progressing, there may be other testing that becomes indicated.
So far, I love this. I love how you said about the symptoms. No, I've kept on feeling better and better. And, I'm to the point where on the 4-year mark, my energy has been still keep on increasing.
One of the indicators of heart disease can certainly be a lack of energy, feeling tired all the time, getting winded easily when you're exerting yourself. Those are some common symptoms that we'll see with heart disease, with atherosclerotic heart disease. The ones that most people are probably most aware of is getting, chest pains, tightness in your chest. Typically, that's going to start when you exert yourself. If someone is not getting symptoms with that type of exercise, that's another reassuring factor that they probably don't have clinically significant atherosclerotic heart disease. And what I mean by that is that what we're really concerned about is, might there be a narrowing in one or more of the arteries of the heart that is progressed to the point that blood flow to the heart is being reduced. That's what we're ultimately trying to figure out. There are some scenarios with scores like Raymond's that I might suggest a CT angiogram, which is going to be a more advanced type of scan. Still a CAT scan, similar to the CAC scan, but they would actually put an IV in and give dye, and then we can watch that dye go through the coronary arteries, and we can actually see degree of blockage there. We can see soft plaque versus calcified plaque.
One more question that I have. So is it inevitable for the calc scan to increase with age? Is it going to keep on happening?
Well, no, I don't think it's inevitable, and I think I shouldn't say I think, I know, because I've worked with patients who stop the progression. And the diet is certainly a major part of that. Other lifestyle factors, things like sleep and stress, go in, play a role in this as well. And then, there are some less well-recognized factors that can play a role in this. We can look at things like homocysteine levels. We can look at more detailed cholesterol metrics like lipoprotein A that are, additional risk factors for heart disease, metabolic syndrome, insulin resistance is the primary driver of plaque progression. And so that's always where I start with people. And ultimately, anything that causes inflammation in the body has the potential to, cause blood vessel damage and plaque formation. So, we need to consider things like autoimmune disease, certainly things like smoking. Sometimes we're getting into considerations like heavy metal toxicity or, perhaps chronic infections like chronic mold exposure or chronic Lyme disease. All of these things can play a role in heart disease progression. The reason that I'm such a fan of the coronary artery calcium scan, doing it on a repeated basis, is because it is a proactive approach. We're not just sitting back and saying, well, if you have a heart attack one day, we'll deal with it. We're kind of actively managing it. We're actively looking at it. If someone comes to me and they've been on, low carb carnivore diet, let's say, and their metabolic health numbers all look good, but their coronary artery calcium scan is still progressing, then that's a flag to me that we need to be looking for these other potential causes of inflammation and plaque progression. And that's when we'll, maybe get into deeper dives of lab testing and things like that to try and figure out why it continues to progress.
Dr. Ovadia is one of the leading carnivore doctors. He will be visiting the Steak and Butter Gang alongside Dr. Anthony Chafee, Dr. Tony Hampton, Dr. Sean O'Mara, Rebecca Heichman, and Sean White, the intentional carnivore. So if you would like him to answer your personal questions about your carnivore health, lab work, or anything that you want to know from Dr. Ovadia, I invite you all to join my next challenge by going to the URL shown on the screen. I've also linked a clickable link down below in the description box. I highly recommend that you make sure you have high quality salt on hand. A lot of new carnivores who go through a phase called the adaptation phase go through symptoms like fatigue, lower energy in the gym, headaches, usually due to an electrolyte imbalance. Salting heavier on your meals could be your answer. For many, that's still not enough, and that's where I recommend high quality electrolytes like the brand Element. This box in particular, the teal blue colored one, is the one that I recommend because it is raw unflavored and it does not have any stevia, nothing but the 3 electrolytes shown on the box. These are what the little packets look like. Pour it in your beverage of choice. Mix it up, drink it, and you are good to go. You all can get a free sample pack with any purchase if you go to the URL shown on the screen, drinkelement.com/SBGAL. Also linked to the URL down below in the description box.
Well, shall we check the lab testing then?
For Ray, his report starts with a general chemistry panel, shows us his fasting blood glucose level, which is 90. That I consider to be excellent and ideal. We see his uric acid level at 6.7. Again, another, what I would consider to be in the ideal range. No fructose intake, essentially, in Raymond's diet. So again, there's a common misconception that high protein diets are damaging to the kidneys. Raymond's kidney function looks excellent. We see some of his liver enzymes, his AST, ALT, and his numbers, again, both under 20, which are ideal. There's no evidence of fatty liver disease. And then, of course, we get to the lipid panel, probably the most controversial area when it comes to blood work. Yeah. And, Ray's total cholesterol level is what would be considered high by most physicians, nowhere near as high as many of the carnivores I'm aware of have. So Ray's got a total cholesterol level of 216. But within that, he's got an exceptionally low triglyceride level of 50. And he's got a pretty good HDL level of 45. There are certainly people that have much higher HDL levels. And again, this is probably some genetic influence. And then we look at the ratio between those two, the triglyceride to HDL ratio that many people have heard me and many others talk about. And Ray's ratio is just over 1, which is excellent. Anything less than 1.5. I consider to be ideal on that ratio. And again, we have lots of data to suggest that if the triglycerides are low and if the HDL is high, that LDL becomes largely meaningless. It's really not about the amount of your cholesterol. It's about the quality of your cholesterol. And so triglyceride to HDL ratio is one of those indicators of the quality of our cholesterol. Now, Raymond fortunately got an advanced lipid panel as part of his testing as well, what we call the NMR panel. And what the NMR panel shows us is the size of his cholesterol panel, of his cholesterol particles, and understand that, LDL is a family of lipoproteins that are carrying cholesterol through the bloodstream, and they come in a range of sizes from small to large. But what we know is that the smaller lipoprotein particles, the small LDL particles, are the ones that are involved in plaque formations, and the large ones are not. So the additional insight we get from the NMR panel is that most of Ray's LDL particles are larger particles, and therefore not concerning. And this is another nuance that, I certainly focus a lot on, but many doctors don't. Many doctors don't recognize. First of all, most doctors don't check an NMR panel. They just go by the basic lipid panel. And so we see Raymond's LDL size is 21.7, which is in the large range. Sometimes you'll see this referred to as pattern A, which is large, versus pattern B, which is small. And so Raymond's particles are mostly large, and therefore I don't think, they're problematic. I don't see a reason why we need to be targeting reduction of his particles, because his particles are healthy and large. A couple of other markers, that I'll look at to help us figure out quality of cholesterol is the V-LDL measurement. Raymond's is very low, 9. I tell people anything under a 15 for V-LDL I consider ideal. The lab normal range is actually up to 40, which I think is just crazy. That's excessively high. If you have a lab that doesn't report V-LDL, there are 2 ways you can estimate it off of a basic cholesterol panel. Divide your triglycerides by 5 is going to be an estimate of your V-LDL. And you can also calculate what's called remnant cholesterol, which is mostly VLDL. There's a little bit of other stuff in there, but it's a kind of good enough estimate for most purposes. And to calculate remnant cholesterol, you take your total cholesterol and then you subtract your HDL cholesterol and then you subtract your LDL cholesterol. And what's left over is what's considered your remnant cholesterol. When I'm looking at someone's lipids, the bare minimum that I want to see is the basic cholesterol panel, the NMR panel, which includes the particle size, the LDL particle size. And then I want a VLDL, or if it's not available, I'll calculate the remnant cholesterol to give us, again, the information about the quality of your cholesterol, not just the amount of your cholesterol. Now, they did your insulin resistance score, which suggests that Raymond is not insulin resistant.
C-reactive protein, I always heard that was an important one.
C-reactive protein, which is one of our inflammation markers, very important as well. And yours is very low, 0.36. Anything under 1, I consider excellent. And then I'll also point out the vitamin D level. Your vitamin D level is actually what I would consider lower than ideal at 24.6. And vitamin D, it turns out, between vitamin D, vitamin K2, and calcium, there's an important interrelationship there. One of the things I do recommend for people with coronary calcification is maintaining higher levels of vitamin D. So you're someone, based on this blood work, you probably want a higher vitamin D level. Getting out in the sun, sometimes it's just based on where we live. We may not get adequate sun exposure for much of the year, and supplementing vitamin D may be needed. You're someone that I would say we want to really see your vitamin D level probably in the 40 to 50 range. And between the lifestyle and the supplementation, we probably want to get this up some. Probably vitamin D with vitamin K2, vitamin D3 with K2 would be a recommendation there.
And also blood pressure. I used to be pre-hypertensive all the time, but now it's like regular. 2
other tests that I would recommend for anyone with coronary calcification, if they haven't been done previously: Lp(a) or lipoprotein A, which is a type of LDL particle, but it also interacts with the blood clotting system and confers additional risk for coronary disease. There's a large genetic component to lipoprotein A. There is some modulation, probably by diet and metabolic health. It's largely genetically determined. If you check it once and it's low, you probably can be assured that it's going to stay low the rest of your life. If you check it and it's high, it's probably something that you want to, again, talk with a good practitioner about ways that you might be able to mitigate that risk. And then homocysteine. This is another important one that doesn't really get checked on routine panels, is another risk factor for the development of heart disease. And homocysteine levels have to do with your B12 and folate metabolism and whether or not you're able to perform a sort of detoxification, what we call methylation. Many people will have heard of the MTFHR mutation. That's fairly common. And so anyone with heart disease, I recommend checking homocysteine. And, even people without heart disease, it's probably worth checking at least once to determine whether or not you might have that additional risk factor.
Wow. Thank you, Dr. Ovadia. Definitely going to check those.
All right. So I think we're going to jump on to Emily's lab work here.
Mine are very simple. I did not get the full of everything, but I'm just loving the information that you're giving us about the math formulas, that we can figure out so much about insulin resistance based off of these other formulas. But yes, let's go on. This, doctor, this was actually about 6 months into my carnivore journey. So I am due to have more ran. And I know now so many more things to look at. I had been keto fasting, was carnivore right around 6 to 7 months, and got this big whopper of a number on my total cholesterol that, kind of blew everybody away.
Yeah. And so again, what's becoming a relatively common phenomena that we see in people doing low carb and carnivore. And, a couple of important things to point out about this. First of all, This doesn't occur with everyone. This sort of lean mass hyperresponder phenotype, as it's been labeled, is variable. And the data we have is, probably somewhere between 30 and 50% of people that go on low carb diets will see this rise in total and LDL cholesterol. And for many people, it's temporary. It gets better over time. Really, there are two populations I would say that I've noticed this in. So there's the lean mass hyperresponders, and these are people that are lean to start with, and then they go on carnivore low carb diets, and they see this, pretty dramatic increase. And then there are people who are overweight, who are actively losing weight, low carb, ketogenic, carnivore diets. And they, get this rise. And for many of those people, once their weight stabilizes and they're not actively losing weight anymore, oftentimes their cholesterol numbers will come back down some. The lean mass hyperresponders tend to stay higher, and again, this probably, Dave Feldman obviously has spoken extensively about this, and it probably is reflective of these lipids, these cholesterol particles that are being trafficked through your bloodstream. If for whatever reason you just have more of these cholesterol particles going through your bloodstream at that period of time, we might see these elevated numbers. But very common, someone like yourself will come to me, Emily, and they'll have just this basic cholesterol panel. That's all their doctor has checked, and their doctor is freaked out, and maybe they're freaked out. And, we have to try and figure out what's going on here. So, similar to what I said with Raymond, there's a lot that we can determine just from this basic panel. But usually we're going to want to go into more detail. So we look at a score of 437 total, LDL of 362, HDL of 63.9, and triglycerides of 54. So, I would start by looking at that triglyceride to HDL ratio, and yours is less than 1. Your triglycerides are less than your HDL, and that is an excellent indicator of insulin sensitivity. It is highly unlikely that you're insulin resistant with these numbers. And then we can, again, calculate that remnant cholesterol level. And yours is going to be, 437 minus 362 is going to be 75. And then we take away 64, and we're left with a remnant cholesterol level of 11. I hope I did that math right on the fly.
That's what I got. I just did it while you were telling me how to do it, and I got 11.
And like I said, anything under 15 is good here. So again, another indicator that you're likely not insulin resistant. We can do the triglycerides divided by 5 as well to get V-LDL estimation. And again, that's going to come out right around 11. Yeah. So, I would say someone with this panel, when I'm looking at it, I would say it's highly likely that you're insulin sensitive. You probably have a lot of large LDL particles around, but I want that information. So I'm going to say, let's get an NMR panel on you. Let's measure your fasting insulin and, determine your insulin resistance score. Let's get that information. And then, this is someone that I would say, yeah, it's probably a good idea that you go and get a coronary artery calcium scan. Honestly, at this point, I pretty much tell everyone they should get coronary artery calcium scans, whether your cholesterol level is good or not, or whether you have a concerning panel like this. But when someone comes to me and they're like, my doctor is really, pushing me on the LDL front, the answer is get a CAC scan at least, because that can give us some more information about what we're actually interested in. Which is whether or not you're developing coronary plaque. Remember, no one really cares. You don't feel your LDL cholesterol level. LDL doesn't actually kill you. Heart attack is what kills you. And that's the concern. So let's see if you're forming plaque in your arteries or not. And this is really my contention with LDL as a metric of health in general, is that it's a lousy metric of health. It's a lousy predictor of health. And let's really get the information that we care about. And the information that I care about, like I said earlier, is the quality of your cholesterol, not the amount of your cholesterol, and whether or not you're forming plaque in your arteries or not.
I've never felt excited to go pursue this and get extended labs, but I kind of am now. So thank you, doctor. You've kind of given me what I need to get me motivated to get more information. I'm excited.
Yeah, definitely. And again, ultimately, these are the questions that people should be asking their practitioners, and to be perfectly honest, many people may go to their family doctors and start asking questions, and not that your doctor isn't going to be cooperative. Your doctor maybe just doesn't understand this, doesn't know this detail. And that's when it, might be worthwhile in finding another practitioner to work with, someone who does understand these nuances and can help you to, get through all this information.
Well, thank you, Dr. Ovadia, for going through our blood work and providing your expertise. I hope you guys found this video helpful, informative, and enlightening on how to really read your lab work as a carnivore. Dr. Ovadia is one of the leading carnivore doctors. I get to invite him on as a guest speaker in my next Carnivore 30-Day Challenge. He will be visiting the Steak and Butter Gang alongside Dr. Anthony Chafee, Dr. Tony Hampton, Dr. Sean O'Mara, Rebecca Heischman, and Sean White, the Intentional Carnivore, to answer personal questions from all of the challengers who sign up for my upcoming challenge. So if you would like him to answer your personal questions about your carnivore health, lab work, or anything that you want to know from Dr. Ovadia, I invite you all to join my next challenge by going to the URL shown on the screen, sbgmeetup.com. I've also linked a clickable link down below in the description box. If you have any questions about the challenge that you want to know before signing up, you can also email me at sbgchallenge@gmail.com. Like Dr. Ovadia mentioned, how much stress you're dealing with day to day and the quality of your sleep are also huge factors in your overall health. Something that I've implemented every single day to protect my eyes from harsh, stressful blue light. Having some high quality protective blue blockers are excellent to make sure that our eyes are not strained, and it also helps our bodies produce more melatonin at the end of each day. This yellow one is medium protection, and this red one is the one that I recommend. It is maximum protection, called the Magnum style. It sits so well on my face. Nose rests are adjustable. Something else that I've really loved from Bon Charge as well is their mini massage gun. Really helps with my lower back discomfort, especially since flying straight back from China a couple months ago. Turn it on with the button here. Highly recommend it if you just need some extra relief. So everything that I love from Bon Charge is linked down below, as well as my discount code. If you have any guests, doctors, specialists that you would like to see me interview, feel free to comment it down below. I always take note of any requests, whether it be guests or video topic ideas, as long as you let me know down below in the comments. I appreciate you guys. Thank you so much for your support as always, and I will see you in my next video. SVG out.